A freezing night in Chicago, a trembling girl at a billionaire's gate. One quiet plea, please don't send me away. And a man who thought he'd seen everything suddenly faced a choice he couldn't ignore. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her past. But the moment he let her stay, everything he believed about people, about loss, and about second chances was about to change in ways he never imagined. The snow had started before midnight, quiet at first, like a whisper brushing across the surface of Lake Michigan. By the time the wind picked up, the streets along the north side of Chicago had turned into long, empty ribbons of white. Streetlights flickered through the storm, casting pale halos that barely reached the ground. In the distance, the city still breathed, cars moving, people living. But out here, near the gated estates along the frozen lake, the world felt paused, sealed off from everything human. Lily Jackson stood at the edge of that silence, her thin coat doing nothing to hold back the cold. Her fingers had gone numb long ago. She could no longer feel the fabric of the worn backpack strap pressed into her palm, but she held on to it anyway, like letting go might mean losing the last thing that was still hers. Snow clung to her curls, melted against her forehead, and ran down the side of her face like tears she didn't have the strength to wipe away. In front of her, the iron gate stood tall and unmoving. Beyond it, the Caldwell estate stretched wide under the storm, warm lights glowing from tall windows, the long driveway lined with trimmed hedges now buried beneath fresh snow. It looked like another world, a world where people didn't have to beg to stay alive through the night. Lily swallowed, her throat dry despite the cold air biting at her lungs. She had walked for nearly an hour to get here, past closed diners, past bus stops where no buses came anymore, past people who looked at her once and then looked away. She hadn't planned to end up here. Not really. But when the wind turned sharper, when the cold started to feel like something alive crawling into her bones, she had followed the only lights she could see, and they had led her to this gate. A small security booth stood to the side, its window fogged from the heat inside. She hadn't noticed the guard at first, not until the door swung open and a man stepped out, his boots crunching against the snow. "Hey," he called, his voice cutting through the wind. "You can't be here." Lily flinched, instinctively stepping back. I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling more from exhaustion than fear. I didn't know where else to go." The guard looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her coat, her shoes, the way she hugged herself to stay warm. There was no cruelty in his expression, but there was something else. Distance, the kind that comes from deciding someone doesn't belong before they even speak. "This is private property," he said. "You need to move along." Lily's lips parted, but no words came out at first. She glanced back at the empty road behind her, where the snow had already begun to cover her footprints. The world she had come from was disappearing, step by step, as if it had never existed. "I can leave in the morning," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the wind. I just need somewhere to stay tonight." The guard shook his head. "Can't help you. There's shelters downtown." "They're full," Lily whispered. He hesitated, just for a second. Then his expression hardened again, as if reminding himself of something. "Not my problem," he said. "You gotta go." The words landed harder than the cold. Lily felt something in her chest tighten, not sharp like panic, but slow and heavy, like a door closing somewhere deep inside her. She had heard those words before. Not my problem. They followed her like a shadow, from one place to the next. She took a small step forward, then stopped herself. "Please," she said. The word slipped out before she could stop it. It hung in the air between them, fragile and exposed. The guard frowned. "Look, kid, please don't send me away." Her voice cracked this time. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. For a moment, even the wind seemed to quiet. The guard shifted uncomfortably, glancing back toward the house as if hoping someone else would take over the situation. And then, as if summoned by the tension itself, a figure appeared at the far end of the driveway. Tall, still, moving slowly through the snow as though the storm had no right to touch him. Edward Caldwell. He didn't rush. He didn't call out. He simply walked forward, one measured step at a time, until the light from the gate reached his face. His coat was dark, perfectly fitted, untouched by the chaos around him. Even the snow seemed to fall differently near him, quieter, more respectful. The guard straightened immediately. "Mr. Caldwell, I was just handling—" Edward raised a hand, not looking at him. His eyes were on Lily. They were not unkind, but they were not warm either. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and decided a long time ago that feeling less was the only way to survive. "How did you get here?" he asked. His voice was calm, low, controlled. Lily swallowed again, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "The gate. It wasn't fully closed," she said. "I didn't mean to. I just followed the lights." Edward studied her in silence. He noticed the snow melting into her hair, the way her shoulders shook slightly with each breath, the worn edges of her backpack. He noticed everything. That was the kind of man he was. And still, his expression did not change. "This isn't a shelter," he said. "I know. You're not supposed to be here." "I know," she repeated, softer now. The wind picked up again, pushing against her like it was trying to finish what the cold had started. Edward's gaze shifted briefly toward the empty road behind her, then back to her face. "You want money?" he asked. Lily shook her head immediately. "No, sir." "Then what?" She hesitated, because the truth felt too small to matter in a place like this. "I just need somewhere to stay," she said. "Just for tonight." Edward exhaled slowly, as if weighing something he didn't want to deal with. "You should leave," he said. The words were quiet, final. Lily felt her chest tighten again, harder this time. For a second, she thought she might not be able to speak at all, that this would be the moment she turned around and walked back into the storm, the way she always did when doors closed. But something in her refused. Not pride, not hope, just the simple, stubborn instinct to survive. She took one small step forward, her boots sinking into the snow. "I won't be any trouble," she said. "I can sit in a corner. I won't touch anything. I won't even sleep if you don't want me to. Her voice broke again. "Please don't send me away." The words hung there, heavier now. Edward didn't respond immediately. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face. Not softness. Not yet. Just recognition. Like he had heard those words before, in another time, from another voice he could no longer answer. Then it was gone. He turned slightly, as if already deciding to walk back toward the house. Lily felt it, the moment slipping, and behind her, the wind howled louder, swallowing the road, erasing the last trace of where she had come from. She didn't know it yet, but somewhere beyond that darkness, someone was already looking for her, and they were getting closer. The wind pressed harder against the iron gate, rattling it just enough to make a hollow sound that echoed down the long driveway. Snow gathered along the edges of Lily's shoes, creeping into the thin fabric, numbing her feet until she could no longer tell if she was standing straight. Edward Caldwell turned his back. For a second, that was all it took. Lily felt it, the decision settling into place. The quiet kind. The kind that didn't need to be spoken twice. She had seen it before, in different faces, different places. People didn't always shout when they turned you away. Sometimes they just stopped looking at you. She lowered her eyes. "I understand," she whispered, though he hadn't asked for understanding. The guard shifted, relieved the moment seemed to be ending. "You heard him," he said, not unkindly, but firm. "Time to go." Lily nodded. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, fingers stiff and slow, then turned slightly toward the road. The snow had already erased most of her path. There would be no easy way back, no clear direction forward, just white and wind and whatever waited out there. She took one step, then another. Behind her, Edward paused. It was subtle, a hesitation that no one would have noticed if they weren't watching closely. But something about the sound of her boots against the snow, soft, uneven, almost careful, lingered longer than it should have. He exhaled slowly. "Wait." The word cut through the storm. Lily stopped immediately, her body going still before her mind caught up. She turned back, unsure if she had imagined it. Edward had not moved from where he stood, but his gaze was no longer distant. It had sharpened, focused again on her, not as a problem, but as a question he hadn't finished answering. "One night," he said. The guard blinked. "Sir." "One night," Edward repeated, quieter now, but more final. "She doesn't stay in the house." Lily didn't move. It took a second for the words to reach her, to make sense. When they did, something fragile flickered in her chest, so small she almost didn't trust it. Thank you," she said quickly, her voice shaking again. "I won't cause any trouble. I promise." Edward didn't respond to that. He turned slightly toward the guard. "Open the side entrance." The guard hesitated just long enough to show he disagreed, then nodded. "Yes, sir." The gate slid open with a low mechanical hum. Lily stepped inside carefully, as if crossing a line she wasn't meant to cross. The driveway stretched ahead of her, wide and quiet, the snow untouched except for Edward's footsteps. The house loomed larger now, its windows glowing warm against the cold night. But she didn't look at it for long. She kept her eyes down, following at a distance as the guard led her toward a detached structure near the side of the property, a large garage half lit, with a narrow door already unlocked. "You'll stay here," he said, pushing it open. Inside, the air was warmer than outside, but only slightly. The concrete floor held the cold like memory. A single overhead bulb cast a dull yellow light across a parked car, and a small workbench cluttered with tools. It wasn't comfort, but it wasn't the street. Lily stepped inside, her shoulders easing just a fraction. "Thank you," she said again, this time softer. The guard shrugged. "Don't thank me. Be gone by morning." She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." He lingered for a moment, then added, almost reluctantly, "There's a blanket in that cabinet. Don't touch anything else, I won't." He closed the door behind him, leaving her alone. The silence settled in around her, thick and unfamiliar. For a while, Lily didn't move. She just stood there, listening, to the wind outside, to the faint hum of the house in the distance, to her own breathing slowly finding a steadier rhythm. Her hands were still shaking, but not as violently now. She crossed the room carefully, each step deliberate, as if she were afraid the ground might reject her. The cabinet creaked when she opened it. Inside, folded neatly, was a single gray blanket, clean, soft enough to matter. She pulled it out and wrapped it around her shoulders, closing her eyes for just a moment as the fabric held in what little warmth her body had left. It felt like something she hadn't known she needed. Not safety, just pause. She slid down against the wall near the workbench, pulling her knees close to her chest. The concrete was still cold, but the blanket helped. Enough. Her stomach tightened, a dull ache that had become familiar over the past 2 days. She ignored it. Food wasn't what she had come for. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. The screen flickered to life, dim and cracked at the corner. No new messages, no missed calls. For a second, she let herself believe that maybe he had stopped looking. Maybe the storm had slowed him down. Maybe. The thought didn't finish, because somewhere deep down, Lily knew better. She turned the phone over and placed it beside her, face down. Across the property, inside the main house, Mrs. Helen stood near the kitchen window, watching the snow fall. She had seen the girl from the moment the gate camera lit up. Seen the way she stood. Too still, too careful. Not like someone asking for money. Like someone asking not to disappear. "You should have sent her away," one of the younger staff members had muttered earlier, drying dishes with quick, irritated movements. "People like that bring trouble." Mrs. Helen had not answered then. Now, she simply shook her head to herself. "People like that," she murmured under her breath. "Or people like us." Before we forgot, she turned from the window and reached for a small pot on the stove, stirring it absently. Upstairs, Edward stood in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey resting on the desk beside him. He hadn't meant to stop her. He told himself that. It would have been simpler to let her walk away. Cleaner. Safer. He moved toward the window, looking out over the snow-covered grounds. The garage set off to the side, barely visible through the storm. One night, that was all. He had made the rule clear. No complications, no stories, no involvement. Still, something about the way she had said it lingered. "Please don't send me away." He closed his eyes briefly. For years, nothing had reached him. Not loss, not regret, not the memory of voices he no longer heard. He had built a life where feeling less was the only way to function. And yet, tonight, in the middle of a storm, a stranger had stood at his gate and asked for something so small it felt unreasonable to deny. Not money, not comfort, just space. Down in the garage, Lily shifted slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes moved across the room, taking in the details, the tools lined up in order, the clean edges of the car, the way everything had a place. She noticed things like that. Always had. It made the world easier to understand. She pushed herself up slowly and walked toward the workbench. A loose hinge caught her attention. A cabinet door slightly misaligned, hanging just enough to show it had been overlooked. Without thinking, she reached out and adjusted it, tightening the screw with a small tool she found nearby. The door settled into place with a soft click. She paused, then stepped back, as if realizing what she had done. "No touching anything," she whispered to herself. She placed the tool back exactly where she found it, but the door stayed fixed. She returned to her spot on the floor, pulling the blanket around her again. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. Time moved differently when you weren't sure you were allowed to stay. Her stomach tightened again, sharper this time. She closed her eyes, breathing through it. "It's okay," she murmured under her breath. "Just one night." Outside, the storm continued, and somewhere, miles away, a man sat in a truck parked under a flickering streetlight, staring at a glowing phone screen. A location ping blinked once, then again. He smiled. "Found you," Marcus Hill muttered. The engine started with a low growl. Back at the Caldwell estate, the snow kept falling, covering the driveway, the gate, the path Lily had taken to get there. Inside the garage, she leaned her head back against the wall, eyes finally beginning to close. For the first time in 2 days, she allowed herself to rest. She didn't know the danger had already started moving toward her again, and this time, it knew exactly where to find her. The garage stayed quiet through the night. Snow tapped lightly against the small window near the ceiling, the sound soft but constant, like someone knocking and never quite being heard. The bulb overhead flickered once, then steadied again, casting long shadows across the floor. Lily Jackson slept sitting up, her back against the cold concrete wall, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her head tilted slightly to one side, curls brushing against the rough surface behind her. Every now and then her body tensed, as if expecting to be shaken awake, but no one came. For the first time in 2 days, exhaustion had won. Hours passed unnoticed. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock chimed 6. The sky outside shifted slowly from black to gray, the storm easing into a quieter fall. Snow still covered everything, but the wind had calmed, leaving the world in a strange, suspended stillness. Lily stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion flickering for a moment before memory returned all at once. The gate, the cold, the voice telling her to leave, and then the voice telling her to stay. One night. She blinked, adjusting to the dim light, her breath forming faint clouds in the air. Her neck ached from the position she had slept in, and her fingers felt stiff as she moved them. But she was inside. That alone felt like something fragile and rare. She pulled the blanket closer, letting herself sit there for just a few seconds longer. Not moving, not thinking, just existing in a space where no one was shouting her name. Then the habit came back. Don't stay still too long. Don't take up space. Don't give anyone a reason. Lily pushed herself up slowly. Her stomach tightened immediately, a sharp reminder she hadn't eaten anything real in days. She pressed a hand against it, breathing through the discomfort. "It's okay," she whispered again, like she had the night before. She looked around the garage, careful, observant. Everything was still in place. The car, the tools, the cabinet she had quietly fixed. No one had come in during the night. No one had checked on her. That made sense. People didn't check on you unless they expected something from you. She folded the blanket neatly, smoothing it out the way she had seen people do in places she'd only passed through. Then she hesitated, and unfolded it again, wrapping it around her shoulders one last time before stepping toward the door. The handle was cold against her palm. She opened it slowly. The morning air hit her face, sharp but cleaner now that the storm had settled. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that promised light without warmth. The driveway stretched ahead, covered in untouched snow except for faint tire tracks leading toward the main house. For a moment, Lily considered leaving. She had said she would. One night. No trouble. No expectations. That was how you survived, by leaving before people had to ask you to. But her body didn't move. Not yet. Instead, her eyes drifted toward the house. Lights were on in the kitchen, a soft glow, steady and warm. She didn't remember deciding to walk that way. Her feet just carried her, slow and quiet, leaving faint prints behind her. She kept her head down, her shoulders slightly hunched, like she was trying to make herself smaller against the wide, open space. When she reached the side entrance, she paused. The door wasn't fully closed. A thin line of warm air slipped through the gap. She pushed it gently. It opened without a sound. The kitchen inside was large but not overwhelming, clean, organized. Sunlight hadn't reached it yet, so the only light came from overhead fixtures and a small lamp near the counter. No one was there, but everything felt lived in. A pot sat on the stove. Plates were stacked neatly beside the sink. A towel hung just slightly uneven from its hook. Lily stepped inside carefully, closing the door behind her. The warmth wrapped around her immediately, sinking into her skin, easing the tightness in her chest. She closed her eyes for a second, letting herself feel it. Then she opened them again. Don't get comfortable. Her gaze moved across the room, taking in every detail. And then she saw it. A small mess near the counter. Flour spilled lightly across the surface. A bowl left out. A cabinet door slightly ajar. It wasn't much. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But Lily did. She always did. Without thinking, she set her backpack down quietly and moved closer. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the counter for a moment, as if asking permission no one had given. I won't touch anything, she murmured to herself. But the flour was already there, and it would take only a second. She found a cloth near the sink and wiped the surface gently, careful not to disturb anything else. She aligned the bowl back where it belonged, closed the cabinet door just enough to make it sit right. Each movement was small, precise, invisible. When she finished, she stepped back immediately, as if the room might notice her. Then her eyes drifted to the stove, the pot. She hesitated longer this time. Her stomach tightened again, sharper now. The smell was faint but unmistakable. Something warm, something simple. Soup. She swallowed. I won't take any, she whispered. Instead, she reached for a spoon. Not to eat, just to stir. The surface had begun to settle, a thin layer forming on top from being left too long. She stirred it slowly, careful not to spill, bringing the warmth back into motion. The scent rose stronger now. Her hands trembled slightly. She set the spoon down, stepped back. That was enough. She turned, ready to leave the kitchen exactly as she had found it. No trace, no trouble. But as she reached for her backpack, her knees weakened just slightly. The room tilted for a second. She caught herself against the edge of the counter, breathing hard. Just go, she whispered. But her body didn't listen. It rarely did, when it was this tired. Behind her, a quiet sound broke the silence. A soft step, then another. Lily froze. She didn't turn right away. She didn't need to. She could feel it. That shift in the air when someone else entered a room. Her fingers tightened against the counter. Then slowly, she turned. Edward Caldwell stood in the doorway. He hadn't made a sound when he entered, but his presence filled the space immediately. His gaze moved from the counter, to the cleaned surface, to the pot on the stove, and finally, to Lily. She stepped back at once. I'm sorry, she said quickly, her voice shaking again. I didn't take anything. I just... Her words stumbled over each other. I was leaving. Edward didn't answer right away. He walked into the kitchen slowly, his eyes scanning the room again. Something about it had changed, but not in a way that disrupted anything. In a way that fixed it. He noticed the counter, the cabinet, the pot. Then he looked at her. You were told not to come inside, he said. Yes, sir. And yet you're here. Yes, sir. The honesty in her voice was immediate. No excuses. No attempt to twist the moment. Just truth. Edward studied her for a long second. Then his gaze dropped briefly to her hands. They were trembling. Not from guilt. From something else. He looked back up. Did you eat? He asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked. No, sir. A pause. Then softer. Not yet. The room went quiet again. Edward turned his attention to the stove, to the pot she had stirred but not touched, then back to her. You didn't take anything, he said. It wasn't a question, no, sir. Why? Lily hesitated. Because there were 100 answers, and none of them sounded right out loud. Because it's not mine, she said finally. The words settled between them. Simple. Clear. Edward looked at her again, something unreadable shifting behind his eyes. For the first time, the question in his mind wasn't what she wanted. It was who she was, and why a girl who had nothing still refused to take something she clearly needed. Outside, the snow began to melt along the edges of the driveway. Inside, the distance between them felt slightly different. Not smaller, but no longer as certain as it had been the night before. The kitchen held that shift in silence. Lily stood near the counter, her fingers still resting against the edge where she had caught herself moments earlier. Edward remained a few steps away, his posture unchanged, but something in his gaze had lost its distance. Neither of them spoke right away. The sound of the simmering pot filled the space between them, soft and steady, like something refusing to break. Then, quietly, Edward reached for a bowl. Lily watched, unsure if she should move, speak, or leave. Her instincts told her to step back, to make herself invisible again before she had overstayed whatever permission had been given. But she didn't move. Edward ladled soup into the bowl, his movements precise, practiced. He placed it on the counter between them without looking at her. Eat, he said. The word wasn't harsh. It wasn't kind either. It was something else. Lily hesitated. I can't, she began. You can, he interrupted. She looked at the bowl. Steam rose gently from the surface, carrying the scent of something simple and warm. Her stomach tightened again, sharper this time, almost painful. I'll pay it back, she said quickly, her voice catching. I can work. I clean, I cook, I fix things. I won't. You don't owe me, Edward said. That stopped her. People didn't say that. Not like that. She looked up at him, searching for the condition behind the words, the hidden cost that always came later. There wasn't one. At least, not one she could see. Just eat, he said again, softer now. Lily's hands trembled as she stepped closer. She reached for the bowl carefully, as if it might be taken away if she moved too fast. The warmth seeped into her fingers instantly, grounding her in a way nothing else had since the night before. She picked up the spoon. The first bite was small. Too small. Her body reacted before her mind could, her breath catching, her shoulders tightening, like she was bracing for something to go wrong. But nothing did. The warmth spread slowly, easing the tightness in her chest, quieting the sharp edge of hunger that had been there too long. She took another bite, then another. Edward watched for a moment, then turned away, walking toward the window. He didn't stay to observe her, didn't make it into something she had to perform gratitude for. That, more than anything, unsettled her, because it felt real. Behind them, the door to the kitchen opened quietly. Mrs. Helen stepped in, pausing when she saw Lily at the counter. Her eyes moved from the girl to the bowl to Edward standing near the window. Something like relief flickered across her face, quickly hidden beneath her usual calm. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," she said. Edward nodded slightly. Mrs. Helen turned to Lily. "Good morning, child," she said gently. Lily froze for half a second, the spoon still in her hand. "Good morning, ma'am," she replied quickly. Mrs. Helen smiled, small but genuine. "You found your way inside," she said. Lily lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "She didn't take anything," Edward said without turning. Mrs. Helen's gaze softened further. "I didn't think she would," she replied. The room settled again. Lily continued eating, slower now, more aware of every movement. She tried to make it last, stretching each bite as long as she could without making it obvious. Mrs. Helen moved quietly around the kitchen, setting things in order that were already nearly perfect. She noticed the counter, the cabinet, the small details that had been adjusted just enough to feel right. Her eyes flickered toward Lily again, thoughtful. "You've got good hands," she said after a moment. Lily looked up, confused. "For noticing things," Mrs. Helen added. "Most people don't." Lily didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Outside, the light had grown stronger. The snow no longer fell as heavily, and faint sounds from the world beyond the estate began to return. Cars in the distance, a far-off siren, the quiet hum of life continuing. Inside, something else began to shift. Not comfort, not yet, but something less fragile than before. Mrs. Helen poured herself a cup of coffee, then leaned slightly against the counter. "You got somewhere to go after this?" she asked gently. The question landed harder than Lily expected. Her hand paused mid-motion. "Yes, ma'am," she said automatically. Mrs. Helen waited. Lily lowered her eyes. "No, ma'am," she corrected softly. Edward's reflection in the window shifted slightly. Mrs. Helen nodded, as if she had expected that. "You got people?" she asked. Lily's grip tightened on the spoon. "Not anymore." The words came out quieter than anything she had said so far. Mrs. Helen didn't press. She had lived long enough to know when silence held more truth than questions ever could. Instead, she asked, "What's your name?" "Lily," she said. "Lily Jackson." Mrs. Helen repeated it once, like she was placing it somewhere safe. "Lily," she said again, nodding. "That's a good name." Lily didn't smile, but something in her shoulders eased, just slightly. Edward turned from the window then, his gaze returning to her. "How old are you?" he asked. 18, sir." A pause. "Are you in school?" Lily shook her head. "Not anymore." "Working?" "Sometimes." The answers were short. Careful. Edward studied her for a moment, then looked away again. "You'll leave after you finish eating," he said. There it was. The line, clear, expected. Lily nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." No hesitation. No argument. She had already prepared for it. But something inside her dipped. Not sharply. Just enough to feel. Mrs. Helen glanced at Edward, but said nothing. Lily finished the soup slowly, setting the spoon down with care when she was done. She wiped the edge of the bowl clean with a piece of bread she hadn't realized she'd been given, making sure nothing was wasted. Then she stood. "Thank you," she said. This time the words were steady. She reached for her backpack, slipping the strap over her shoulder. Edward didn't stop her. Mrs. Helen watched her move toward the door, her expression unreadable now. Lily paused with her hand on the handle. For a second, she looked back, not at Edward, at the kitchen, at the warmth, at something she had already learned not to hold on to. Then she opened the door. The cold rushed in again, and she stepped out into it. Neither of them spoke. But as the door closed behind her, Mrs. Helen turned to Edward. "She's not trouble," she said quietly. Edward didn't respond. "She's running from something," Mrs. Helen added. "I know. Then why send her back out there?" Edward's jaw tightened slightly. "Because whatever she's running from," he said, "will follow her here." Mrs. Helen held his gaze. "And if it does?" she asked. Edward didn't answer right away. Outside, Lily walked slowly down the driveway, the snow crunching beneath her feet. Behind her, the house stood warm and distant again. In her pocket, her phone vibrated. She froze. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she pulled it out. The screen lit up. A new message. Just 4 words. I see where you are. Lily's breath caught. Her eyes darted toward the gate, toward the road beyond it. The world suddenly felt smaller, closer, like the space she had found was already slipping away. Behind her, inside the house, Edward stood at the window again, watching, and for the first time since the night before. He didn't look away. Edward stood still at the window, his hand resting lightly against the cold glass. Outside, Lily's figure moved slowly down the long driveway, her thin silhouette swallowed by the pale morning light and the snow that refused to melt. She looked smaller now, not just because of the distance, but because she was alone again. Inside the house, everything remained warm, controlled, untouched. The polished floors reflected the soft glow of the overhead lights. The quiet hum of the heating system filled the air like a constant reassurance. Outside, there was nothing like that. Edward's eyes followed her every step. He could turn away. He should turn away. That was how things worked. People came into your life unexpectedly, and then they left. You didn't get involved. You didn't carry their stories with you. That was how he had survived everything else. But something about the way she walked, slow, careful, as if every step had to be considered, kept him there. She's not going far, Mrs. Helen said quietly behind him. Edward didn't respond. She doesn't have anywhere to go, she added. I gave her a place for the night, Edward said, his voice calm, measured. That's more than most would. Mrs. Helen didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. Outside, Lily reached the iron gate. It stood tall and unmoving, black bars cutting into the white landscape like a line drawn between 2 worlds. She paused. For a moment, she rested her hand against the cold metal. Then her phone vibrated again. The sound was small, but in the silence of the morning, it felt loud enough to break something. Lily froze. Her fingers trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out the old phone. The screen flickered weakly, the battery nearly drained. Another message. No name, no number saved, just words. I see where you are. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes scanning the empty road beyond the gate. Snow covered everything, smoothing out details, hiding movement, swallowing sound. There was no one there. At least, no one she could see. Her grip tightened around the phone. Another vibration. Another message. Don't run again. Lily stepped back from the gate as if it had burned her. Her chest rose and fell too fast now, her breath turning into thin clouds in the cold air. Inside the house, Edward straightened slightly. Something in her movement had changed. This wasn't hesitation. This was fear. Real fear. What is it? Mrs. Helen asked, noticing the shift in his posture. Edward didn't answer. He was already moving. The front door opened with a sharp sound, breaking the stillness inside. Cold air rushed in, biting and immediate. Lily heard it. She turned. Edward stepped out onto the stone path, his coat unbuttoned, the cold ignored. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then he saw it. Not the snow, not the distance, but the way her hand gripped the phone like it was the only thing holding her together. What happened? He asked. Lily shook her head quickly. Nothing, she said. The word came too fast, too rehearsed. Edward walked closer, his shoes crunching against the snow. "That's not nothing," he said. She took another step back. "I'm fine," she insisted, but her voice wasn't steady anymore. Edward stopped a few feet away. "Who's texting you?" he asked. Silence. Lily looked down at the phone, then back up at the empty road, then at the gate. "It's just someone I used to know," she said. The lie sat between them, thin, fragile. Edward didn't press immediately. Instead, he said, "Are they nearby?" Lily didn't answer. That was answer enough. The wind picked up slightly, sending loose snow drifting across the driveway. Mrs. Helen appeared in the doorway behind Edward, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "Bring her back inside," she said softly. Lily shook her head before Edward could speak. "No," she said quickly. "I shouldn't stay." "Why not?" Mrs. Helen asked. Lily swallowed. "Because if I stay, they'll find me here." Edward's expression hardened slightly. "They," he repeated. Lily looked down again. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said. "I already stayed longer than I should have." Her fingers tightened around the phone again. As if on cue, it vibrated once more. She flinched. Edward noticed that. "Show me," he said. Lily hesitated. Every instinct told her not to share, not to trust. But something in his voice, firm but not demanding, made her pause. Slowly, she turned the screen toward him. Edward stepped closer. He read the message. His jaw tightened. Another vibration. A new message appeared. "You think he can protect you?" The words sat there, cold and deliberate. Edward's eyes darkened. "Who is this?" he asked again, quieter now. Lily's voice barely rose above the wind. "My stepfather," she said. The word hung heavy in the air. Mrs. Helen's hand moved to her mouth slightly, her eyes widening. "He's been looking for me," Lily continued, her voice shaking now despite her effort to stay calm. I left a few days ago. I thought I lost him." She looked up at Edward. "I didn't mean to bring this here," she said. "I didn't know he'd find me this fast." Edward glanced toward the gate, then back at the road beyond it. Still empty. Still quiet. But no longer safe. "You need to leave," Lily said suddenly, her words rushing now. "Please. I'll go. I won't come back. I didn't have anywhere else to go." She turned slightly, already preparing to walk away again. Edward didn't move. "Stop," he said. The word wasn't loud, but it carried. Lily froze. For a second, everything stilled. The wind, the falling snow, the space between them. Edward stepped forward again, closing the distance. "You're not walking out there alone," he said. "I have to," she replied. "No," he said firmly. She shook her head, panic rising now. "You don't understand," she said. "He doesn't stop. If he thinks I'm here—" "Then he won't be the only one who knows," Edward cut in. Lily blinked, confused. "What?" she asked. Edward's gaze didn't waver. "If he wants to come here," he said slowly, "then he'll come here knowing exactly where he's stepping." Mrs. Helen looked at him, something like recognition passing through her expression. Lily stared at him, unsure. "You don't have to do that," she said. "You don't owe me anything." Edward held her gaze. "I know," he said. And for the first time since she had arrived at the gate the night before, he chose not to turn away. Somewhere beyond the quiet street, hidden behind distance and silence. A car engine started, and it was already heading in their direction. The sound didn't belong to the quiet, snow-covered street. It didn't belong to the stillness of early morning in a neighborhood where everything was controlled, scheduled, predictable. It was wrong. Edward heard it too. Not loud, not yet, but enough to register. Enough to disrupt the fragile calm that had settled over the moment. Lily's eyes widened. She didn't need to see the car. She already knew. "That's him," she whispered. Her voice broke in a way she had been trying to hold back since the first message. Mrs. Helen stepped closer to the doorway, her face tightening with concern. "Inside." "Both of you," she said firmly. Lily shook her head immediately. "No," she said, backing away. "If I go inside, he'll know. He'll come right up to the house. I can't let that happen." Edward didn't take his eyes off the road beyond the gate. The faint outline of headlights began to flicker through the falling snow. Still far, but getting closer. "You're not going anywhere," Edward said. Lily turned to him, panic rising. "You don't understand. He doesn't care about rules. He doesn't care about anything. If he sees me here, then he'll see me too," Edward said, his voice steady. That stopped her. For a second, she just stared at him. "You don't know him," she said, her voice shaking. "He'll cause trouble. Real trouble. You don't need that." Edward finally looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "I don't." The wind swept across the driveway again, colder now, sharper. "But I also don't send people back into danger just because it's inconvenient," he added. Lily swallowed hard. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not like this. Not without expecting something in return. The engine sound grew louder. The headlights were clearer now, cutting through the snow as the car turned slowly onto the private road leading toward the estate. Mrs. Helen stepped outside despite the cold, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone low but urgent. "We should call someone." Edward didn't respond immediately. His mind was moving fast now, calculating, weighing risks, consequences, outcomes. This was exactly what he had tried to avoid. Complications, conflict, unpredictable people bringing chaos into a life he had carefully structured to prevent it. He looked at Lily again, at the fear she wasn't hiding anymore, at the way her shoulders tensed with every passing second. And then he looked back at the approaching car. For a brief moment, the old instinct returned. End this now. Send her away. Close the gate. Let the problem disappear. That was how he had handled everything for years. Distance, control, detachment. It had kept him safe. It had kept him functioning. It had kept him from feeling too much. But it had also left him alone. The headlights reached the gate. The car slowed. Lily's breathing quickened. "He's here," she whispered. Edward made his decision. "You're going inside," he said. Lily shook her head again. "No." "That wasn't a suggestion," he said, his tone firm now. She froze. Something in his voice had changed. Not cold, not distant, but certain. Mrs. Helen stepped forward, gently taking Lily's arm. "Come with me," she said softly. "Just for a moment." Lily hesitated. The car idled at the gate. A shadow moved behind the windshield. Watching. Waiting. "Please," Mrs. Helen said again. Lily looked back at Edward one last time. "You don't have to do this," she said. Edward didn't answer. He simply turned and walked toward the gate. That was her answer. Mrs. Helen guided Lily inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around her again. But it didn't feel safe anymore. Not now. Not with him out there. The front door closed softly behind them. Outside, Edward approached the gate just as it began to open. The car rolled forward slowly, tires crunching against the snow. It was an older sedan, dark, worn, out of place against the clean lines of the estate. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Marcus Hill. He was taller than Edward expected. Broad-shouldered, heavy coat, eyes scanning everything with a sharp, restless energy. His gaze landed on Edward immediately. Not surprised, not intimidated, just measuring. "You must be the homeowner," Marcus said, his voice smooth but edged with something rough underneath. Edward stopped a few feet away. "You're on private property," he said calmly. Marcus smiled slightly. "Yeah," he said, glancing around. "Nice place. Quiet. Safe." His eyes returned to Edward. "Good place to hide someone." Edward didn't react. "There's no one here for you," he said. Marcus let out a short laugh. "Come on," he said. "We both know that's not true." The wind shifted again, carrying the faint sound of movement from inside the house. Marcus's eyes flickered toward it. "Lily," he called out, raising his voice just enough. "I know you're here." Inside, Lily flinched. Her body went rigid. Mrs. Helen tightened her grip on her arm. "Stay here," she whispered. But Lily couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Outside, Edward stepped slightly to the side, blocking Marcus's line of sight. "You need to leave," Edward said. Marcus's expression changed. The smile didn't disappear. It just became thinner, colder. "She's family," Marcus said. "You don't get to keep her." Edward's voice remained even. "She's not staying with you." Marcus tilted his head. "And who decides that?" he asked. Edward didn't hesitate. "I do." The silence that followed was heavy. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then he chuckled softly. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said. Edward met his gaze without flinching. "I think I do," he replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Marcus glanced back at his car, then at the house, then back at Edward. "You can't protect her forever," he said quietly. Edward didn't answer. He didn't need to. Marcus opened his car door again, then stopped. "One way or another," he added, "she comes back with me." Then he got in. The engine revved. The car backed up slowly, then turned, disappearing down the road the way it had come. The sound faded. The silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. Edward stood there for a moment longer, watching the empty road. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. Inside, Lily stood frozen near the doorway, her eyes locked on him as he entered. "He'll come back," she said quietly. Edward closed the door behind him. "Yes," he said. Lily's shoulders dropped slightly, the weight of that truth settling in. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Edward looked at her, at the fear, at the exhaustion, at the quiet strength that had kept her moving this far. Then he said something he hadn't planned to say. "You're not leaving tomorrow," he said. Lily blinked. "What?" she asked. "You're staying," he continued, "until this is dealt with." Mrs. Helen looked at him, surprised. Lily shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "You said I changed my mind," Edward said. The room went quiet. Lily stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Why?" she asked. Edward paused. For a moment, he didn't have an answer he was ready to say out loud. Then he looked at her again, and something in his expression softened, just slightly. "Because sending you away didn't feel right," he said. Lily's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She just nodded once, slowly, carefully, as if accepting something she didn't fully trust yet. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the tracks left behind, but not erasing what had already begun. Somewhere beyond the quiet streets, Marcus was already making another plan, and this time, he wasn't coming alone. The thought lingered in the air long after Edward had spoken those words. Lily stood near the kitchen doorway, her fingers wrapped tightly around a warm mug Mrs. Helen had placed in her hands. The heat should have helped. It should have grounded her. But it didn't. Because warmth didn't erase fear. It only made the contrast sharper. "Drink," Mrs. Helen said gently. Lily nodded, but she didn't lift the mug. Her eyes were fixed on the large window that overlooked the front of the property. Beyond the glass, the world was quiet again. Snow continued to fall, soft and steady, covering the driveway, the gate, the path where Marcus had stood just minutes ago, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't been there at all. But Lily knew better. He didn't disappear. He waited. Edward stood across the room, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, controlled voice. "I want someone here today," he said. "Security. Not temporary. Someone who understands what this is." A pause. "No, this isn't negotiable." Another pause. Then he ended the call. For a moment he didn't move. He simply stood there, staring at the dark screen in his hand. This wasn't his life. Not anymore. He had built something predictable, quiet, controlled. No surprises, no chaos. And yet here it was again, standing in his kitchen, wrapped in silence and fear. He exhaled slowly, then looked up. Lily was watching him, not with expectation, not with trust, but with something closer to disbelief. "You don't have to call anyone," she said quietly. "I told you, I'll leave. I don't want this to get worse." Edward walked toward her, stopping a few steps away. "It already is worse," he said. She shook her head. "No," she insisted. "It only gets worse if I stay." Mrs. Helen stepped between them slightly, her voice calm but firm. "And what happens if you leave?" she asked. Lily didn't answer, because she knew she would be alone again, out there, where no one was watching, where no one would step in. Her silence said everything. Edward crossed his arms. "You're not leaving tonight," he said. "And not tomorrow either." Lily looked down. "You don't know him," she whispered again. Edward's voice softened, just slightly. "No," he said, "but I know enough." A quiet settled over the room. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that sits between words that haven't been said yet. Mrs. Helen reached out and gently touched Lily's arm. "Come," she said. "Let me show you somewhere more comfortable than the garage." Lily hesitated. Then slowly, she nodded. Upstairs, the house felt different, warmer, quieter. The hallway lights cast a soft yellow glow across the walls, reflecting off framed photographs, moments frozen in time, family dinners, holiday mornings, smiles that no longer existed. Mrs. Helen led her into a small guest room at the end of the hall. It wasn't large, but it was clean. Soft blankets folded neatly at the foot of the bed, a lamp glowing gently in the corner, a space that felt safe, at least for now. You can rest here, Mrs. Helen said. No one will bother you. Lily stepped inside slowly. She didn't touch anything, didn't sit, didn't move further than the doorway. I'm not used to this, she said quietly. Mrs. Helen gave her a small smile. You don't have to be, she replied. Just try. Lily nodded. But even as she stood there, her eyes drifted to the window. Always the window. Always watching, as if expecting something to appear. Downstairs, Edward stood near the front entrance again, his gaze fixed on the security monitor. The camera showed the empty road beyond the gate. Nothing moved, but that didn't mean nothing was coming. A second phone call came in. He answered without hesitation. They're sending someone, the voice on the other end said. 2 men. Experienced. They'll be there within the hour. Edward nodded slightly. Good, he said. He ended the call. For a moment he stood in silence. Then he walked to the window again. Outside, the snow had begun to slow. The sky lightened slightly, turning from deep gray to pale white. Morning was fully arriving, and with it, exposure. Night had hidden things. Daylight revealed them. Somewhere beyond the property, parked far enough to avoid attention, a dark car sat still. Inside, Marcus leaned back in the driver's seat, his eyes fixed on the distant outline of the estate. He wasn't rushing anymore. He wasn't knocking on gates. He was watching. Waiting. Beside him, another man sat quietly, his presence heavy but still. You sure she's here? The man asked. Marcus didn't take his eyes off the house. She's here, he said. And the owner? Marcus smiled faintly. Thinks he's in control, he replied. The other man nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Marcus finally looked away from the house. His expression had changed. Less impatient, more deliberate. We don't force it, he said. Not yet. He leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the steering wheel. We make him choose, he added. Back inside the house, Lily finally sat down on the edge of the bed. Her body felt heavy now, not just from exhaustion, but from everything pressing in at once. The fear, the uncertainty, the unfamiliar feeling of being somewhere safe. She wasn't used to safety. It didn't feel real. It felt temporary, like something that could be taken away at any moment. Her phone buzzed again. She froze. Slowly, she picked it up. Another message. You can hide, but not forever. Her hand trembled. She stared at the words. Then, for the first time, she didn't reply. She didn't move. She just sat there, waiting. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't over, not even close. And somewhere outside those walls, the next move had already begun. The quiet inside the house felt fragile now, like glass, like something that could shatter with the smallest sound. Edward stood in the foyer, watching the security feed again. The gate, the road, the long stretch of white that led away from the estate. Nothing moved, but he knew better than to trust stillness. Behind him, the house carried on in soft, careful motion. Mrs. Helen moved through the kitchen, preparing something warm. The faint clink of dishes echoed gently. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked as Lily shifted her weight in the unfamiliar room. It should have felt normal. It didn't. A low buzz came from the panel beside the door. Edward's eyes snapped toward it. The intercom. Someone was at the gate. He didn't speak immediately. He simply pressed the screen. The camera shifted, and there he was. Marcus. Standing just outside the gate again. But this time he wasn't alone. Two men stood behind him, their figures broad, quiet, unreadable. They didn't look around. They didn't move. They just stood. Waiting. Edward's jaw tightened. "Open the gate," Marcus said into the intercom, his voice calm, almost polite. Edward didn't respond. "Let's not do this the hard way," Marcus added, his eyes lifting toward the camera as if he could see straight through it. Still, Edward said nothing. Behind him, Mrs. Helen had stopped moving. "What is it?" she asked. Edward didn't look away from the screen. "He brought people," he said quietly. Mrs. Helen's face went pale. Upstairs, Lily heard the faint echo of voices through the vents. Her body stiffened instantly. She didn't need to hear the words. She recognized the tone. She stood quickly, moving toward the door, her heart pounding harder with every step. Downstairs, Edward pressed the button. The intercom clicked on. "You need to leave," he said. Marcus smiled. "You already know I won't," he replied. Edward's voice didn't change. "This is your last warning." Marcus leaned slightly closer to the camera. "You think this is about warnings?" he asked. A pause, then softer. "She belongs with me." The words hung there, cold, deliberate. Edward's eyes hardened. "No," he said. "She doesn't." Marcus's smile faded. For the first time, something sharper slipped through. "You don't know what you're saying," he said. Edward's hand rested lightly against the panel. "I know exactly what I'm saying." Silence. Heavy. Then Marcus stepped back. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned slightly toward the men behind him and nodded. The gate clicked, unlocked. Edward's expression changed. "What did you do?" Mrs. Helen whispered. But it was already happening. One of the men stepped forward, pushing the gate open slowly. The metal creaked against the weight of snow and pressure. Marcus walked in first, not rushing, not forcing, just entering, like he had every right to be there. Edward moved away from the panel, stepping forward. The front door opened before they could reach it. Cold air rushed inside again. This time, it didn't feel like a breeze. It felt like a warning. Marcus stopped a few feet from the entrance. "So," he said, glancing around, "this is where she decided to hide." Edward stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "She's not coming with you," he said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You keep saying that," he replied, "like it changes anything." Behind Edward, Lily reached the bottom of the stairs. Mrs. Helen turned quickly. "No," she whispered. "Stay back." But Lily had already seen him. Marcus, standing there, closer than before, inside the gate, inside the space that had felt safe just moments ago. Her breath caught. Her feet froze. Marcus's eyes found her instantly. "There you are," he said softly. The room seemed to shrink. Edward stepped forward, placing himself fully between them. "Don't take another step," he said. Marcus stopped. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Marcus said. Edward didn't move. "She's not going anywhere with you." Marcus's gaze flickered to Lily again. "She doesn't get to decide that," he said. Lily's voice came out before she could stop it. "Yes, I do." The words were quiet, but they carried. Marcus looked at her. Really looked this time, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to control slipping. "You've always been stubborn," he said. Lily didn't answer. She just stood there, her hands trembling at her sides. Edward didn't look back. "Leave," he said again. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then he stepped forward. Just one step. Edward moved instantly, blocking him. The distance between them disappeared. "Don't touch her," Edward said. The words were low, firm, unshakable. Marcus stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. The two men behind Marcus shifted slightly, tension building in the air like a storm waiting to break. But Marcus raised a hand. They stopped. He looked at Edward. Really looked this time, and then he smiled again. But it wasn't the same smile. This one was colder. "You think you're protecting her?" he said. Edward didn't respond. Marcus leaned in just slightly. "You're just delaying it." Then he stepped back. The tension didn't break. It stretched, thinned, but didn't disappear. Marcus turned slowly, walking back toward the gate. The two men followed without a word. At the edge of the driveway, he stopped, looked back once, at Lily, at Edward, at the house. "This isn't over," he said. Then he walked out. The gate closed behind them with a heavy sound. Silence returned. But it wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. Lily's legs gave slightly, and she reached for the wall to steady herself. Edward turned. For the first time, he looked directly at her. And in that moment, everything had changed. Because this wasn't about letting her stay anymore. This was about standing between her and whatever came next. The front door closed slowly behind Edward, the heavy wood sealing out the cold, but not the tension that had already taken root inside. For a moment, no one spoke. Lily stood near the staircase, her hand still pressed against the wall as if she needed it to stay upright. Her breathing hadn't steadied. Her eyes were still locked on the door, as if she expected it to open again at any second. Mrs. Helen moved first. She stepped closer, her voice soft but grounded. "You're safe right now," she said. Lily didn't answer, because right now wasn't something she trusted. Edward remained where he was, his back to the door, his shoulders slightly tense. He hadn't moved since Marcus left, not because he was unsure, but because something inside him had shifted, and it was still settling. Finally, he turned. His gaze found Lily, and this time, he didn't just see a frightened girl standing in his house. He saw someone carrying something heavy, something invisible, something that had been following her long before she ever reached his gate. "You should sit down," he said quietly. Lily hesitated. Then slowly, she walked toward the living room. Each step felt careful, measured, as if the ground might give way beneath her. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. Mrs. Helen disappeared briefly into the kitchen and returned with a glass of water, placing it gently on the table in front of her. "Drink," she said again. This time, Lily listened. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the glass. She took a small sip, then another. Edward stepped into the room but remained standing. He didn't sit, didn't relax, not yet. "Tell me everything," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Lily looked up at him. There was no pressure in his voice, no demand, just expectation. She swallowed. "I already told you," she said quietly. "He's my stepfather." Edward didn't move. "That's not everything." Silence. Lily looked down at her hands again. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she began. My mom married him when I was 9, she said. At first he was normal, or at least he pretended to be. Her voice was steady, but distant, like she was watching it happen instead of living it. He worked odd jobs, came and went. Sometimes he was gone for days. My mom said he was trying. A pause. But then things changed. Mrs. Helen sat down beside her, listening quietly. He started drinking more, Lily continued. Started getting angry over small things. If something wasn't where he wanted it, if dinner wasn't ready, if I said the wrong thing. Her voice faltered slightly. But she didn't stop. He didn't like that I talked back, she added. Edward's jaw tightened. Lily noticed, but she kept going. My mom tried to protect me, she said, but she got sick, real sick. And when she couldn't stand up for me anymore. The sentence trailed off. She didn't need to finish it. The room filled the silence for her. What happened to her? Edward asked quietly. Lily's eyes didn't lift. She passed, she said. 2 words. Flat. Final. Mrs. Helen reached for her hand. Lily didn't pull away. After that, Lily continued, it was just me and him. Her fingers tightened slightly. He said I owed him, she said, for staying, for feeding me, for not sending me away. Edward's voice came softer now. And did he? He asked. Lily shook her head. No, she said. Another pause. Then she looked up. For the first time, her eyes met Edward's fully. I ran, she said. The word felt heavier than anything else she had said. I waited until he left one night, she explained. Packed what I could. Took my mom's old phone. And I left. She exhaled slowly. I didn't know where I was going, she added. I just kept moving. Edward listened without interrupting, without questioning, just listening. I stayed at shelters, Lily said, bus stations, anywhere I could. I thought if I kept moving, he wouldn't find me. Her voice dropped again. But he always does. The room went quiet again. Not empty, but full. Full of everything she hadn't said, everything she had lived through. Edward looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked the question she hadn't expected. Why didn't you ask for help? Lily blinked, caught off guard. I did, she said softly. Once. A small, almost invisible smile crossed her face. Not a happy one, a knowing one. They told me to go back home, she said. The words landed harder than anything else. Mrs. Helen's expression tightened. Edward didn't react immediately, but something in his posture changed. Subtle, but undeniable. And after that? He asked. Lily shrugged slightly. I stopped asking, she said. Silence. Again. But different this time. Because now, it wasn't just her silence. It was his, too. Edward turned slightly, walking toward the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky was brighter now, but the world still felt cold. He rested his hand lightly against the glass. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, quietly, I had a daughter, he said. Lily looked up. Mrs. Helen stilled. Edward's gaze remained on the window. She was about your age, he continued. Smart, kind, stubborn. A faint breath escaped him. She used to argue with me about everything, he added. A small pause. I thought I had time, he said. Lily didn't move, didn't speak. She got sick, Edward continued. And I kept telling myself, I'd fix it. I'd find the right doctor, the right solution. His hand tightened slightly against the glass, but I was too late. The room fell completely still. Lily watched him, not with fear, not with distance, but with something else, something quieter, understanding. I couldn't protect her, Edward said. The words were almost a whisper. And I told myself, that's why I stopped getting involved, he added, because losing her was enough. He finally turned. His eyes met Lily's again. But sending you away yesterday, he said slowly, felt the same. Lily's breath caught. Edward stepped closer. Not too close, just enough. I won't make that mistake twice, he said. The words settled into the room. Not loud, not dramatic, but unshakable. Lily stared at him. Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to. Outside, the world looked calm again, but beneath that calm, something had changed. Because this wasn't just about hiding anymore. This was about staying, about facing what was coming, together, and somewhere out there. Marcus was already preparing for his next move, but this time, he wasn't chasing someone who was running. He was walking straight towards someone who had decided to stand their ground. The shift was quiet, but it changed everything. The house no longer felt like a place Lily had borrowed for a single night. It felt anchored, like something had been placed between her and the world outside, something solid, something that wasn't moving. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like she had to run. But that didn't mean the danger had disappeared. It had only changed direction. Downstairs, Edward stood in his study, the door slightly ajar. Papers were spread across his desk, old files, reports, documents that hadn't been touched in years. A name sat at the top of one page. Jackson. His fingers rested on it, still, unmoving. Behind him, his lawyer, Thomas Green, adjusted his glasses as he flipped through another file. I didn't think anything would come up this quickly, Thomas said. Most of these records are old, some incomplete. Edward didn't respond. His eyes were still fixed on that name. Say it again, he said quietly. Thomas glanced down. Lily Jackson, he repeated. Mother, Angela Jackson. Occupation. Listed here as a cook. Worked part-time in multiple places. Edward's fingers tightened slightly. Where? He asked. Thomas scanned the page. Various private residences, catering jobs. Wait. He paused. There's one entry that stands out. Edward finally looked up. Go on. Thomas shifted the paper slightly closer to the light. She worked here, he said. A silence followed. Short, but heavy. Edward's expression didn't change immediately, but something behind his eyes did. When? He asked. Thomas checked the date. About 12 years ago, he said. Short-term contract. Kitchen staff. It doesn't say much beyond that. Edward leaned back slightly in his chair. 12 years. His mind moved quickly now, pulling fragments forward. Images, moments, faces that had blurred over time. But one thing became clear. He remembered her, not Lily, her mother, Angela, a quiet woman, always early, always careful. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was kind. And there had been a day, a moment he hadn't thought about in years. She brought her daughter once, Edward said slowly. Thomas looked up. What? Edward's voice grew distant. There was a storm that day, he said. She couldn't leave the girl alone, so she brought her with her. He stood up now, walking slowly across the room. I remember because my daughter was there too. The air shifted. Thomas stayed silent, listening. Edward's steps slowed. They met in the kitchen, he continued. Two little girls, same age, both too curious for their own good. A faint breath escaped him. They laughed, he said. The memory was clearer now, sharper. They were playing near the stove, he added. One of the pots was too close to the edge. His jaw tightened. It slipped. Thomas leaned forward slightly and... Edward's eyes lowered. She moved first, he said. Who? Thomas asked. Edward looked back at the paper. At the name. Lily, he said. The realization settled slowly, but completely. She pulled my daughter back, Edward continued, before the pot could fall. The room went silent. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't need to, because the weight of that moment filled everything. She didn't even say anything, Edward added, just grabbed her and stepped away. He paused, and then she went back to sitting quietly like nothing happened. A long breath left him. I thanked her mother, he said, but I never looked at the girl again. The words felt heavier now, because they weren't just memory. They were something else, something unfinished. Thomas closed the file slowly. So you're saying, he began. Edward nodded. Yes, he said. That girl is her. Upstairs, Lily sat on the edge of the bed again, her hands resting in her lap. The house felt different now, not just safe but watchful, like it was waiting for something. She looked around the room slowly, at the soft blankets, at the lamp, at the quiet stillness that didn't feel empty anymore. Her eyes drifted to the hallway, then back to the door. For a moment she hesitated, then she stood, slowly, carefully, and stepped out. Downstairs, she found Mrs. Helen in the kitchen again. The older woman looked up, her expression softening. You should rest, she said gently. Lily shook her head. I can help, she said. Mrs. Helen smiled faintly. You've done enough already. Lily didn't move. I want to, she insisted. A pause. Then Mrs. Helen nodded. All right, she said. Come here. Lily stepped closer. Together they moved quietly around the kitchen. Simple things, wiping counters, arranging dishes, filling the silence with small, steady motions. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. Edward stood at the doorway, watching. He didn't interrupt. He didn't announce himself. He just observed. The way Lily moved, careful, deliberate, like she didn't want to take up too much space, like she was still unsure if she belonged there. And something about that didn't sit right anymore. He stepped forward. Both of them turned slightly. Lily, he said. She froze, just slightly, then looked at him. Yes? Edward paused. For the first time since she arrived, he didn't see a stranger. He saw a moment, a memory, a small girl in a kitchen, saving something that mattered without asking for anything in return. You've been here before, he said. Lily blinked. Confused. What? She asked. Edward took another step closer. A long time ago, he continued. With your mother. Her expression shifted, uncertain. I don't remember, she said softly. Edward nodded. I didn't either, he admitted. A pause. Then he said the words that changed everything. but I should have. The room went still. Mrs. Helen looked between them, sensing something deeper. Edward's voice lowered. "You helped my daughter," he said. Lily's breath caught. "What?" she whispered. Edward held her gaze. "You saved her from getting hurt," he said. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Lily shook her head slowly. "I don't," she began. But the memory flickered. Faint. Blurry. A kitchen. A storm. A girl laughing. A pot slipping. Her hand tightening. Pulling. Moving. Then nothing. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice barely there. Edward nodded. "That's the point," he replied. The truth settled into the room, not loud, not dramatic, but powerful, because everything had just shifted. This wasn't chance, this wasn't coincidence. This was something that had started long before either of them realized it. And now, it had come back. Full circle. Edward looked at her again, not with distance, not with hesitation, but with something new, something certain. "I owe you," he said. Lily shook her head quickly. "No," she said. "You don't." But Edward didn't agree, because for the first time in years, he understood something clearly. This wasn't about debt. This was about something unfinished, something that had been waiting to be seen. And now that it had been, there was no going back. The truth didn't explode. It didn't shatter the room or force anyone to raise their voice. It simply settled. Quiet. Heavy. Unavoidable. Lily stood still in the middle of the kitchen, her hands slightly trembling, her eyes fixed on Edward as if she were trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "You remembered," she said softly. Edward shook his head. "No," he replied. "I didn't." A pause. "Not until now." That hurt more than if he had forgotten entirely, because now it meant something had been there all along, and still went unseen. Lily looked down. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just moved her out of the way." Edward's voice was calm but firm. "That's not nothing." Mrs. Helen watched them both, her expression quiet but knowing. Somewhere deep inside her, she understood what was happening. Not just the danger, but the connection. The kind that doesn't announce itself until it's too late to ignore. A sudden knock broke the moment. Sharp, unexpected. All three of them turned toward the front door. Edward didn't hesitate this time. He walked straight to it, opened it. Two men stood outside, different from before. Dressed in dark coats, clean, professional, alert. Security. "They're here," one of them said. "We'll take position around the property." Edward nodded. "Make sure no one gets in without my approval." The man gave a short nod. "Yes, sir." They moved quickly, efficiently, disappearing into the perimeter like shadows that belonged there. Edward closed the door. For the first time since this began, the house didn't feel exposed. It felt guarded. But protection didn't erase reality. Because what Marcus had said still lingered. This isn't over. And he wasn't wrong. The next move came sooner than expected. Not with footsteps, not with force, but with attention. By midday, a black SUV stopped at the end of the street. Then another and another. People stepped out. Not Marcus. Not his men. Reporters. Cameras. Microphones. Word had spread. Fast. Too fast. Inside the house, Lily stood frozen again, her eyes wide as she watched the scene unfold through the window. They found out, she whispered. Mrs. Helen stepped beside her. It happens, she said softly. No, Lily said, shaking her head. It shouldn't. Edward stood behind them, his expression unreadable. This isn't an accident, he said. Lily turned to him. What do you mean? Edward's voice was steady. He wants pressure, he said. He wants this public. Lily's chest tightened. He's done this before, she said. He makes people look like they're the problem. Edward didn't respond immediately, because he understood. Reputation, perception, control. Marcus wasn't just chasing her, he was shaping the narrative, and now Edward was part of it. The phone rang. Edward answered. Caldwell. A pause. Then his expression shifted slightly. Yes, he said. I'm aware. Another pause. No, I won't be making a statement yet. He ended the call. They're already asking questions, he said. Mrs. Helen frowned. About what? Edward looked at Lily. About why a young girl ran to my house in the middle of the night, he said. About who she is. About who I am to her. Lily's stomach dropped. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said. Edward stepped closer. I know, but it did, she said. Yes, he replied. Silence. Then Lily asked the question she had been holding back. What are you going to do? Edward didn't answer right away. Because the answer mattered. Not just for him, but for her. For everything that came next. He walked toward the window, looking out at the growing crowd beyond the gate. Flashes of cameras, voices calling out questions that couldn't be heard from this distance. But the intention was clear. They were waiting. For a story. For a mistake. For something to turn into headlines. Edward exhaled slowly. For years he had avoided this. Avoided attention. Avoided involvement. Avoided anything that could pull him back into the kind of life he had stepped away from. But now, there was no distance left to keep. He turned back, looked at Lily. Really looked at her. Not as a problem, not as a responsibility, but as someone who had already changed his life long before either of them realized it. I'm going to stand in front of them, he said. Lily blinked. What? I'm going to tell them the truth, he continued. Mrs. Helen's eyes widened slightly. Edward. But he didn't stop. They want a story, he said. Then they'll get one. Lily shook her head quickly. No, she said. You can't. That'll make it worse. For who? He asked. For you, she replied. Edward's expression softened slightly. I've been worse, he said. A pause. Alone, he added. The word hung there. Lily felt it, because she understood it. More than anyone. You don't have to do this, she said again. Edward stepped closer. Yes, he said quietly. I do. Silence filled the space between them. Not uncertain, not fragile, but clear. Because something had shifted beyond choice now. This wasn't about helping anymore. This was about standing, about drawing a line, about saying no and meaning it. Edward reached for his coat. Mrs. Helen watched him carefully. Are you sure? She asked. Edward nodded. Then he looked at Lily one more time. I'm not sending you away, he said. Her breath caught. And I'm not letting anyone take you, he added. Outside, the noise grew louder, the cameras closer, the questions sharper. Edward opened the door. Cold air rushed in, but this time, he didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, into the light, into the attention, into the story that was no longer avoidable. And behind him, Lily stood still, watching, because for the first time in her life, someone wasn't asking her to leave. They were choosing to stay. The front gate stood tall under the gray Chicago sky, its iron bars now lined with flashing lights and restless movement. Cameras lifted, voices overlapped. Questions flew like cold wind across the driveway. Edward Caldwell stepped forward without rushing, without hiding. The moment his figure appeared beyond the gate, the noise surged. "Mr. Caldwell, is it true you're harboring a runaway? Who is the girl? Is this connected to the incident last night? Are you aware of allegations?" He raised one hand. Not high, not dramatic, just enough. And somehow, it worked. The noise lowered, not gone, but quieter, controlled. Edward didn't speak immediately. He let the silence settle first, the kind of silence that makes people listen. "I'll answer your questions," he said calmly, "but not the way you expect." A few reporters leaned in closer, cameras focused. "This is not a scandal," Edward continued. "This is not a crime." He paused. "And she is not a problem." Inside the house, Lily stood just behind the doorway, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of the frame. She wasn't supposed to come this close, but she couldn't stay away. Every word felt like it was being said for her, and because of her. Outside, one reporter stepped forward. "Then why is she here, Mr. Caldwell?" Edward didn't hesitate. "Because she needed somewhere safe," he said. Another voice cut in. "And you just decided to take her in?" Edward's gaze didn't shift. "No," he said. "She came here." A murmur spread. "Why your house?" someone asked. Edward's eyes flickered for just a second, then back. "Because sometimes," he said slowly, "people end up exactly where they're supposed to be, even when they don't understand why yet." That wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the one he gave. Inside, Lily's breath caught in her chest. Because she didn't understand it either. Not fully. Not yet. Another reporter raised a voice. "Are you saying you know this girl?" Edward looked straight ahead. "Yes," he said. That word hit differently. Simple. "But heavy, and in what way?" the reporter pressed. Edward took one step closer to the gate. "She is someone who once helped my family," he said, "long before any of you knew her name." The cameras leaned in. The questions sharpened. What kind of help? Why was this never reported? Is there proof? Edward didn't answer immediately. Because this part wasn't for them, and he turned slightly, not toward the reporters, but toward the house, toward the doorway, toward her. Lily froze as his eyes found hers. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The noise, the cold, the pressure. It was just that look. Steady, certain, unwavering. Then he turned back. "There is proof," he said calmly, "but it doesn't belong to you." That shifted the tone. More tension, more curiosity, but also something else. Respect. Because he wasn't reacting. He was setting boundaries. Another voice rose from the crowd. "Mr. Caldwell, are you planning to keep her here permanently?" This time, Edward didn't answer right away, because that question wasn't his to answer alone. Inside, Lily felt her heart begin to race. Her hands loosened slightly from the doorway, not because she was ready, but because she understood. This was the moment, the one that changes everything. Mrs. Helen stepped beside her quietly. "You don't have to go out there," she said softly. Lily shook her head. "I know," she whispered. A pause. Then she took a small step forward. "But I don't want to hide anymore." Mrs. Helen didn't stop her, didn't reach out. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk forward on your own. Lily stepped into the light, slow, careful, but steady. The moment the reporters saw her, the noise rose again. Cameras shifted, voices sharpened, but Edward moved slightly, just enough to stand beside her, not in front, not blocking her, just there, with her. Lily glanced at him. He didn't speak, didn't guide her. He simply stayed. And somehow, that was enough. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces, at the eyes that once would have made her run. Her voice came out soft, but clear. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said. The noise quieted again. "I just needed a place to stay," she continued. "Just for one night." A pause. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "I didn't ask for anything else," she said, "and I still don't." The honesty in her voice, it cut through everything. One reporter lowered their microphone slightly. Another stopped writing, because this wasn't what they expected. Lily swallowed, then said the one thing that mattered most. "But he didn't send me away." Silence. Real silence. The kind that stays. Edward looked at her. Not surprised. Not uncertain. Just present. And for the first time since this began, Lily wasn't alone in her own story. A few seconds passed. Then Edward spoke again. "This is her home," he said. The words landed heavier than anything else. Not temporary. Not conditional. Home. Lily turned to him slowly, her eyes wide. Because that word, it wasn't something she had ever held on to. Not really. Edward's voice softened slightly. "If she chooses it," he added. That mattered, more than anything. Because this time, it wasn't being given. It was being offered, and she could say yes or no. Lily looked at the house behind them, at the warm light through the windows, at Mrs. Helen standing just inside, waiting, not expecting, just there. She turned back, looked at Edward, then down at her own hands, then slowly, she smiled, small, careful, but real. "I'd like to stay," she said. The words were quiet, but they changed everything. The tension broke. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough. Enough for the air to feel different. Enough for something heavy to finally lift. Edward nodded once. No grand reaction. No dramatic movement. Just understanding. And acceptance. The reporters didn't rush in this time. They didn't push. Because something had shifted. This wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a moment. And even they knew. Some moments aren't meant to be interrupted. Inside the house later that evening, the kitchen lights glowed warm and soft. The storm outside had calmed. Snow rested quietly along the edges of the windows. Lily stood by the stove, not because anyone asked her to, but because it felt familiar, safe. She stirred a simple pot slowly, the scent filling the room. Mrs. Helen watched from the table, a gentle smile resting on her face. Edward stood nearby, Not speaking, not directing. Just there, waiting. When Lily finally turned, she hesitated. Just for a second, then carried the food over. Set it down carefully. 3 plates. Not one. Not separate. Together. She stepped back, almost like she didn't belong in the moment. Edward noticed. He pulled out a chair. Not for himself, for her. Lily looked at it. Then at him. "You cooked," he said simply. She nodded. A small motion. He gestured gently. "Then you should sit." She hesitated again. Then slowly, she did. Mrs. Helen leaned forward slightly. "Well," she said softly, "this feels right." No one disagreed. For the first time in a long time. There were no questions, no fear, no running, just quiet, warmth, and the sound of something beginning. Lily picked up her fork, paused, then looked up, at Edward, at Mrs. Helen. And for the first time in years, she wasn't waiting to be told to leave. She was being asked to stay. And this time, she believed it. When Lily finally sat down at that table, 3 plates, warm food, and someone waiting for her, that was the moment everything changed. Not because she was rescued, but because she was finally seen. Some of the most powerful acts in life are the ones no one notices in the moment, like the quiet way Lily kept choosing kindness, even when the world gave her nothing back. And sometimes, the people we overlook today are the very ones who once changed our lives without us ever realizing it. So today, think about someone you've crossed paths with and forgotten too quickly. Maybe take one small step, look again, listen a little longer, because you never know whose story you're standing inside, just like Edward once was with Lily. If this story touched you, comment 1 below. Or tell me, have you ever helped someone without knowing what it meant to them later? Stay with me, because the next story might make you see a familiar moment in a completely different way.